injuries and percentage of injuries in the US and in India. And same thing again, women experience ACL tear up to 9 times more often than men. That is because of the various physiological anatomical structures. We'll discuss about that later in the coming slides. And then from the past 2 decades, we have seen the significant increase in number of ACL tears in adolescents as well. So this reason will be discussed in the later. So just if you see about the one of the study which has been done about the injury in the knee, overall if you take overall injury of the knee, around the studies have been taken around 700 and odd knee injuries, out of which if you can see the maximum is ACL. 314 knees have been and ACL have been injured, and next comes the medial meniscus, and then later on lateral meniscus and medial collateral ligaments. So this graph itself shows along with the ACL there is also small very much possibilities of nearly 50% of the possibilities of even the medial meniscus is also having involved. So out of this all this, the 60.2% of the population did not return to sports. This is really alarming percentage or the alarming population which really need to be considered. Okay. So if we just talk about the anatomy, of the ACL, it's basically composed of multiple collagen fascicles surrounded by an endotendinium, which is grouped into fibers of measuring 38 mm in length, and that is about 25 to 14 mm, and in diameter it's around 10 mm in width, and microscopically it is composed of interlacing fibers, that is 150 to 250 nanometers in diameter. This is what the structure, microscopic structure of the ACL. But again, when you see some more, is basically the composition of ACL is 90% is type 1 collagen and only 10% is type 3 collagen, right? So if you talk about the attachments from how it runs and the ACL attachments, from femoral attachment, it is lateral intercondylar ridge, demarcates the anterior edge of the ACL and bifurcates the ridge, and at the end is the posterior bundle attachment, that is of the femoral attachment. I'll show you the figure later. And the same way, from the femur it runs down anteriorly to the tibial attachment that goes anterior tibia between intercondylar eminence. That is how the attachments at the femoral attachment as well as the tibial attachment of the ACL is considered. So basically there are two bundles in the ACL, that is anteromedial bundle and the posterior lateral bundle. So in the anteromedial bundle, it is more of an isometric type of structure or contraction which takes place in the anteromedial, and it is tight throughout knee range of motion, but the maximum tight is in the flexion movement, that is 90 degrees and beyond. So this anteromedial bundle is basically responsible for restraining the anterior tibial translation, which we check during the knee slack. So same goes with the posterior lateral bundle. The greater its length, this is a maximum bundle which changes its length during the flexion and extension, and it is tightest in extension and very slack in mid flexion, and this is primarily responsible for rotational stability, that is pivot movements. So this is one small structure about the ACL here. So can you see my markings here, if my mouse movement?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is all the ACL ligament, which is runs all the way from the posterior attachment from the femur and anteriorly to the tibia. So basically the blood supply of the ACL is primarily the middle genicular and inferior medial and lateral genicular arteries. And the innervation comes from the posterior articular nerve, which is a branch of the tibial nerve. And it definitely has the mechanoreceptors described on the surface of the ACL, and they are located on the femoral insertion site. And these have as you all know, they are the proprioceptive qualities, which help in later in the rehabilitation process. So if we talk about we being the physiotherapist, we are very much interested in the biomechanics. So if you consider about the biomechanics of the ACL, the main function of the ACL is to restrain the anteroposterior translation of the tibia when related to the femur. So it's also acts as a secondary restraint to tibial rotation, that is valgus or varus stress, which helps in checking the valgus or varus stress. So during the passive range of knee extension, the amount of force that is put on the ACL is 100 nanometers, 100 newtons, sorry. And whereas during walking, it produces about 400 newtons of force on the ACL. But whereas during any activities, this force really jumps to 3 to 4 times, that is around 1700 newtons during cutting maneuvers or during acceleration or deacceleration or during running. Is the maximum 1700 newtons is what the load has been put on the ACL during these activities. So you can just consider, you can just imagine the amount of stress which is been taken by the ACL during the normal movements, and whereas how much it jumps during the activities. And in spite of that, it can still sustain 20% beyond its limit during before it gets cut. Okay, and the important variables that influence ACL strain are the position of the knee and the dynamic interaction of the muscle activity. It's like what was your knee position, whether it was in full flexion or full extension, and whether it has been twisted, the femur has been twisted over the tibia, and whether it was internal rotated or external rotated. These are all the major activities or the actions which you consider during before it breaks. So Benon and colleague has shown that increasing knee extension increases strain on the ACL. Okay. So the position and length of the bundles vary with changing angles of knee flexion and extension. I'll show you in the next slide. The ligament has been shown to elongate by up to 3 mm with extension. The next slide I can show you. Yeah, this is on the left side of the screen, that is on extension. This is the anterior and this is the posterior side, and on the right side of your screen, it is on the 90 degrees of flexion. Okay, so if you see here during extension, the anteromedial bundle and this the posterior anteromedial bundle is fully slacked, tightened, and the posterolateral is fully slacked. Same as when you go into the flexion, the anteromedial, the posterolateral is completely stacked and anteromedial is completely stretched. Is that clear? Yeah, this is how the anteromedial and the posterolateral bundles of the ACL behave during the different angles. I'll still will go in detail about the different angles. Yeah, from 0 to 30 degrees of flexion, the anteromedial bundle shortens from its baseline. With continued flexion from 30 to 70, the anteromedial lengthens back to its baseline length, where it gets stretched. And beyond 70 degrees of flexion, the bundle continues to elongate and beyond the baseline length until it reaches to 120 degrees of flexion. Whereas on the other side, the posterior bundle is maximum length and the maximum strain is fully extended, as I showed you in the previous slide, this slide. So as the knee goes on bending, the posterolateral bundle shortens, achieving the minimal strain at about 120 degrees of flexion. So during the flexion, the posterolateral bundle will be in a very, there is no any stress on that. On the contrary, anteromedial bundle has more stress on it. And same wise, when you are extended, the posterolateral bundle is in a full strained or full loaded, but the anteromedial bundle is relaxed. So what are the basic causes of this ACL injury? So one, that is it can be in various ways, the way the position of the limb and the way you have a position of the changing the direction. That is, it can be sudden change in the direction, or stopping suddenly, or slowing down while running, or landing from jump incorrectly, or direct contact for collision, such as in case of football or rugby, or in case of kabaddi, like games. So the several studies have shown, as I showed told you in my introduction slide, that the female athletes have been higher in the incidence. That is reason behind is the physical conditioning, because in the case of females, they have the strength of the ACL have been seen that it is slightly 20 to 30% lesser than the men. Muscular strength of that is when you say about the muscular strength, that is about the quadriceps and as well as the hamstrings. And the neuromuscular control, that is also one of the major reason for the increase in the female athletes, higher incidence of injury. And as you all know that the pelvis of the females is a bit larger, and because of which the alignment of the femur and the tibia will change as compared to the straight line in the males. So pelvis and the lower extremity alignment is also one of the contributing factor for increasing the ACL injuries in ladies and females. And estrogen, the effect of estrogen on ligament properties, that also leads to softening of the ligament and increased activation of the quadriceps, that's related to hamstring. That is, quadriceps to hamstring ratio is quite, it has to be 1:1 or 2:2. I mean, it has to be equal. Whereas in case of females, that is somewhat either the hamstring is strong or the quadriceps is strong. Because of the change in the variation in the ratio, this is one of the reason for the injury in the females. And decreased ratio of firing of medial and lateral quadriceps and hamstrings in the same injured leg also lead to increase in the ACL injuries in the females. So approximately around 70 to 80% of the injuries are the result of non-contact mechanism. That is wrong jumping or wrong landing or sudden acceleration or deacceleration or changing the direction. So these are the major. Only some 20 to 30% are the only reason where we come in the contact sports, like in the rugby or football or the kabaddi like sports. So one of the most common mechanism that effect is called the position of no return. This is something like this is the position of the limb where the athlete cannot change his position when he jumps or lands. That is where the knee and hip and knee are completely extended, and knee is in the valgus and internally rotated when considered to the tibia, and the foot is pronated. This is basically seen in the long jumpers or the high jumpers at this position. So when you come in this position, it's very difficult for the athletes to suddenly change the position and bring out in the normal position. That's why it is called as the position of no return. So these are the certain patterns of injury where the twisting and hyperextension injury commonly which is seen in the ACL and as well as the PCL. This is something like hyperextension in case of football players, and this is hyperflexion in case of the jumpers. And this also can be seen in the twist and rotation in case of skiing, and as well as twist and rotation in case of rugby players. These are few of the examples where the position of where you see the different position of the limbs where the ACL gets torn. So it's not only that one position that where the ACL will be hindered. So these are the different positions where you can see the ACL tear. So this is another where you can see the twisting and rotation of the tibia over the femur, and that leads to tear in the ACL. So these ACL injuries can also occur in the combination of the damage to the meniscus. As I showed in this earlier slide, out of 700 and odd knee injuries, 300 and odd were the ACL injuries, and the next highest was the meniscus. That is basically the medial meniscus. So here there's the same thing happens. Along with the ACL injuries, we can also see the other structures around the knee. That is the first and the foremost is the meniscus. It can be either the medial and the lateral. Again, if you consider in that, the medial meniscus is the most common injury along with the ACL. Then comes the articular cartilage, and then comes other ligaments. It can be either the PCL or MCL or the LCL. And also it can be the microfractures like avulsion fractures or the hairline fractures, which can also be seen. It all depends on how severe the this one impact is. It's not necessary, but it all depends on how severe the impact is. All the combination can be seen. So the secondary damage may occur in the patients who have repeated episodes of instability due to the ACL. It's not sometimes these injuries can, in the initially it can be only the ACL injury, but if it is not has been done, the proper rehabilitation process has not, if it has not undergone the proper rehabilitation process, then if he, from the next time if the same ACL gets injured, at that time he can come under this combination of the injuries like the meniscus or the other articular cartilages. So in the chronic instability, up to 90% of patients will have a meniscus damage, that is medial meniscus again. And when reassessed after 10 or more years of the initial injury, and even after the 10 or even after even after 10 years of more, even we can see along with the meniscus injury, we can even see the cartilage wear and tear also in the long run of the ACL injuries. So similarly, the prevalence of articular, as I said, the articular cartilage lesions, that is increased up to 70% in the patients who have 10-year-old ACL deficiency. So this is really the thing to be considered, or the to study, to avoid this subsequent injuries of either the meniscus or the articular cartilage. So in that case, our rehabilitation process has to be really strong, and we'll discuss about it, how well we can do that. So that's why O'Donoghue has coined it as an unhappy trade, because it's not a good business, because along with the ACL, we also see the MCL and as well as the other ligament tears. That's why it is called as the unhappy trade. So lately, lateral meniscus tears are more common, seen, which is along with the combination of ACL and MCL. If you recollect whatever the graph I showed in the previous slide, there you can see that after the meniscus, MCL is the next one which gets injured. So when you come across the ACL injuries, the first thing what you see are what are the symptoms of these ACL injuries. So it might, patient or the athlete might hear the popping noise if it is depending on the severity, or he may even see the, you can see the 70% swelling with hemarthrosis, and there is loss of full range of motion and tenderness along the joint line and discomfort while walking. It can be even so much discomfort, even if it is complete, depending on the severity. If it is complete tear, even he can't even put any load on the injured leg. These are a few of the symptoms we immediately see on the field. So how to evaluate these ACL injuries? So basically, before evaluating, we need to know what is during the evaluation, we need to understand what is the mode of injury, that is the mechanism of injury, what was the position of the limb, whether it was in hyperextension, or it was in the complete flexion, or whether it was in twisting. So mechanism of injury, and what did the athlete hear, whether there was any popping or any cut like sound, and was there any immediate swelling. If you're on the field, then that's okay, but if a patient comes after the few days after the injury to your clinic, and these are the early symptoms which you need to ask the athlete. So was there any previous injuries, or is this the first time you torn the ACL? If not the first time, even if ACL is torn first time, was there any other injury, other knee injuries or the fractures or other ligament injuries? We need to ask them. And any late sequelae post injuries, if it has come very late to your clinic, then we need to ask him what are the other sequelae which he has come across during this period. So, and also including the re-injuries, if it is this the first time the injury or second time, or what was the proper, whether the surgery was done or not. If not, whether the conservative management was it done properly, whether the protocol has been followed properly. All these things has to be evaluated in the early stage. So sensations such as popping, as I told you, or tearing at the time of injury, and whether he can bear the weight or not, whether it was giving out, whether the knee was suddenly giving out, that are all the things we need to evaluate. And whether he can, if you are not on the field, then you need to ask him whether could he, after the initial management, could he go to the field again to play, or whether he was totally out of the game. So post-traumatic swelling of the knee joint, which is manifestation of whether he was a hemarthrosis, which is seen in the 12 hours after the injury, or cordyceps avoidance gait, that is what we call in sometimes the hand to knee gait. Whether he could, was that any such type of gait should be evaluated. So when it comes to a knee, comes to the knee for evaluation and to the clinic, these are the certain stability testings like anterior stability or a posterior or varus and valgus, that is Latchman's or anterior drawers or pivot test or McMurray's test, which you all know that which helps in understanding the anterior stability or the posterior stability, or even there is any injury in the meniscus. So, and again thing, let me tell you, these are not the final decision. These testings are not the final things. We cannot completely rely on these. These are some of the tools. Just we are some of the tools which can test, but cannot conclude with these testings or the tests. So once we during this itself, during this stability test itself, we can get to know what is the grade of injuries. That is, we call it, we consider it as a sprains or graded on the severity of the scale. That is, grade 1 sprain is the slightly ligament is mildly damaged, but there is no any basic cut in the structure, so it has been slightly stretched, but is still able to keep the knee joint stable, and within few days he can come back onto the field. That is grade 1 sprain. And if it is grade 2 sprain, there is slight stretch in the point where it becomes loose, and you can see when you do the anterior draws test, you can see slightly. When you compare to the non-affected, you can see the slightly movement in the tibia. That is where you can see, understand there is slight sprain, that is grade 2 sprain. This is often referred to as a partial tear. A partial tear is something, anything below 50% is a partial tear where we consider. And grade 3 is a complete tear of the, or more than 50% of the tear of the ligament. This has been split into 2 pieces, or the joint is totally unstable. So these are the few ways of grading, and which is widely used in the grading of the ACL tear. So as soon as you see, this is when you see the knee, it is something like a, you call it as a bum knee because of the swelling. And which is, you need to re-evaluate that one. So investigations is something like we have got a MRI and the orthoscopy, which shows the grades of tear and the percentage of tear, whether it's 25 or 50% or complete tear. This is not our job actually. So the ultimately, when you go to this one, when you see any surgeons, when they see the scan report or the orthoscopic report, as soon as they read that ACL injury, everybody, at least in my experience, 70 to 80% of the surgeons, they directly go to the this one. So they already directly opt for the surgeries. But unfortunately, we being a physios, as a sports physios, there are a lot of chances that where we can manage even if it is a grade 2 strain, still we can manage without going for the surgery, provided we go to the vigorous rehabilitation process and the proper way of rehabilitation process, still we can manage without the surgery. But again, provided it depends on what game the player is playing. If it is heavily on, if it is a jumper, or if it is a runner, it's a slow runner or the sprint runner, depending on the type of movement it is knees involved in that game, we need to take a decision. We cannot take all of them, we cannot put him under conservative management. So what I mean to say here, when the surgeon says that he has torn the ACL, and this is many of them I've heard, many of the players come to me and ask, sir, the surgeon has said that you have torn the ACL, and that's many of them have said that this one life of your sportsmanship have ended, but it is not that in that case. So we as a physios, we need to give them a confidence that you can still be on your field, on your ground, and can play your game. So what are the pre-operative rehabilitation? This is very important. It's not something like, today you have torn, or maybe in a weeks ago you have torn the injury, you have torn the ACL, and you have come up with a lot of inflammation, and it's not something like you need to immediately go for the surgery. So to have a proper good outcome in the post surgeries, with this prehabilitation and the pre-operative rehabilitation is very, very important. So what are the pre-operative rehabilitation? First is first and the foremost, we always have to listen to the pain and the inflammation. That is price protocol, that is protection. It is protected, the affected area is protected so that we do not injure any further ligament, any further soft tissue injuries around the knee. And rest, of course, to avoid any exercise that reduce your daily physical activity. Application of ice every 15 to 20 minutes, at every hours to 2 hours. And nowadays you are getting a lot of different ways of icing it, either in the form of tubes or in the form of caps, along with the pressure compression. So ice and the compression, that is use elastic compression bandage, or as I said, we are even having a proper measured pressure where we can put up along with the icing. So this compression is used to avoid further swelling, and definitely elevation to limit this, get the swelling reduced. So this is the basic price protocol which are we use in the acute stage. And the pre-op exercises, once the inflammatory signs have come down, and then we'll go for the static quadriceps and SLR exercises and VMO exercises. And of course, considering the grade of the injury, knee has to be put up into the brace and make him walk with the walkers or the crutches, so that these exercises can help later in the post-op cases. These we can improve or maintain the quadriceps and hamstring exercise, hamstring strength, which helps in the early recovery in the post-op stage. So what are the options for graft? Though it is a surgeon's call, but still we need to know what are the grafts has been used, so that according to this, what are the graft has been used, our post rehabilitation protocol changes. We'll discuss about that later. But so for that, we need to understand what are the grafts available or used during this ACL injuries. One is patellar tendon graft, which is occasionally lead to patellar tendon. Because of this, the disadvantage is the patellar tendonitis, and of course there is immediate post-op stiffness by the use of patellar tendon graft, and that's the reason we need to have an aggressive range of motion exercises, considering the inflammatory and healing stages. It is about one, we have got a patellar tendon graft, and the next one is a hamstring tendon graft. This is less operative pain and tendonitis is very much less, which is the most commonly used. And the next one is quadriceps tendon graft, which is easy to harvest the thickness, and we get the adequate graft. And the donor site symptoms, the less donor site symptoms and less quadriceps inhibition compared to patellar graft. There is also another option of graft, that is allograft, that is which we take it from the cadaver. And the advantage of this one is lesser chance of patellofemoral symptoms, that is we call it as anterior knee pain. So shorter operation time, that is which is taken by the surgeons, and availability of longer grafts, as long as you can, whatever the amount of grafts that is available, because we are taking from the cadaver, and scar is very less, and thereby the possibility of ligament reconstruction. But the disadvantage of this one on the allograft, that is cadaver, which is used on the cadaver, is the cost is higher, and healing may lead to potential graft rupture. The healing time is more, because since we are taking it from the cadaver, from the different structure, different body, the tissue has to get adjusted to the donor site. So that's the reason that the healing, it will take a longer time, or sometimes even it may fail if the body won't accept. So the graft may fail. So again, the disease transmission and immune reactions, because we don't know what are the diseases the cadaver had. So these are the disadvantages of having from the allograft. So once we get it, once the surgery is done, what are the aims of the post-op rehabilitation? That is early range of motion. We need to have we have a phase by phase. We have a range to be achieved, but definitely the good amount of range has to be achieved in the first two phases. So immediate weight bearing on the knee, on the injured knee, on the early return to sport activities in the shortest time possible, considering the other factors, without compromising the integrity of the surgical reconstructed knee. That is very important. That doesn't mean if you have to push him, if the player says that I have a tournament within the next 2 months or 3 months, we cannot take that into consideration. It has to be certain strict protocol has to be followed. So control of pain and swelling, as I said, we have to follow the Price protocol, early reactivation of the quadriceps patellar mobilization to increase the range of motion, early return to weight bearing. So these are the aims of post rehabilitation. That is achieve full extension right after the surgery and regain 10 degrees of flexion per day. Full extension, we have seen many of the times, we have seen flexion is not at all the problem, but in many of the cases, last 20 to 30 degrees of extension is where it gives a lot of headache for the physios and as well as especially for the physios. So full extension, that is quadriceps strengthening and early quadriceps strengthening and the BM exercise can avoid this problem. So achieving the full extension, that is a must first and the foremost. And by 7 to 10 days of post-op, the knee should achieve 90 degrees of flexion. Bracing in slight hyperextension, that is again, as I said, to avoid any lack of extension. And current ACL reconstruction rehabilitation protocol emphasize immediately on the range of motion. There are many surgeons which follow the old protocol, which put the patients on 3 weeks of in the immobilization phase, that may hinder the post rehabilitation very badly. So again, as I said, an immediate weight of bearing and earlier return to sports 4 to 6 months. This is not the fixed phase or fixed period coming back to the sports in the 6 months. So as I said, the very important is time frame and guidelines for all the protocol changes depending on the player, type of the graft used, and the physical and the anatomical structure of the athlete. Excuse me. So what are the complications of post-op? As we know, that is all the inflammatory signs will be there. That is pain will be there, swelling or the effusion will be there. There is no any movement. Arthrofibrosis, if we don't move the knee early, inappropriate graft placement, whether it will be too loose or it can be too tight, and that leads to anterior knee pain. So abnormal gait, if it is too loose, still he will be buckling, and if it is too tight, he'll be walking with a tight knee or without able to bend the knee. And muscle atrophy because of lack of movement for 2 to 3 weeks, and inactivity of the quadriceps. So usually there is a loss of extension, which is more commonly seen and very poorly tolerated than loss of flexion, which have been discussed earlier. So there is reflex inhibition of muscle activity leading to muscle atrophy and early degenerative changes of the joint, that is articular cartilage, and even slight changes of the meniscus also. So after everything, sometimes all the surgery has been done, everything is fine, but still there is a problem in the knee. So why is it? That is what the player asks. It's still giving the problem. The surgeon, many of the times, now the trend has been changed, but in the older, the surgeons who follow the old school still has no any answer for that X. So the next very important, important question from any athlete is, Doc, now this one has been done, the surgery has been done. You said the surgery was fantastic. Now when I can be on the ground, which is very much important for any athlete or any elite athlete. So based on the various objective criteria, these are the certain criteria which need to be considered before putting them on the field. That is how long the surgery has been. It's not necessary. Many of the time the athlete may come immediately after the surgery, or he might have been under the physiotherapist during his stay in the hospital, but it can be either the negligence of the athlete or the misguidance from the surgeons. It can be anything. So he may come to you at the long term after maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks or or even the 2 months after the surgery. So the timing also the matters. So depending on the timing, or depending on how, when the protocol, when the rehabilitation has started, the playing time is considered. So timing and type of surgery and patient's symptoms, whether it's still there is any swelling, still there is a lot of pain, and again we need to consider a physical examination, that is still there is any slack even after the surgery, and isokinetic and functional testing has to be done, and patient satisfaction and psychological readiness, because a lot of this is very much important. This psychological aspect is very much important in the athletes, because still they'll be very apprehensive before going for the play. So considering all these are the certain criteria before we are putting on the game. So see, to summarize, whether before putting, what are the criteria which has to be implemented before going for the play. These are the pre-operative factors, operative factors, and the post-operative factors. As I said, pre-operative factors before, immediately after the surgery, whether what was the range of motion, because if it is the surgery has been delayed, the range of motion will be less, because he'll not be able to move his knee. What will be the quadriceps strength, whether it has been attained, what is the, the percentage of the strength has come down, and if there is any absence of the effusion, and timing of the surgery, as I keep on telling you. And operative factors, what is the type of graft has been used, whether bone to bone or hamstring, and other graft choices. Anatomical placement I discussed about you, whether it has been too short or too long, whether it has been too tight or which is too short, it will be still slack. That is anatomical placement of the graft, and graft tension, and ligamentization, whether the ligament has been completely healed, and whether it has been, because since we are taking it from either from the patella, or it has been whether it has been taken from the hamstring, has it been accepted, or has it been healed completely. That is the process is called as ligamentization. That is during, these are the operative factors. And the post-operative factors, if you consider, there's a participate how quick he has been in the rehabilitation program, whether after the post-op, and criteria of post-operative criteria of the return to play, that is isokinetic or functional testing, which has to be taken, and timing of the surgery, and psychological readiness, whether the athlete is ready, or still in apprehensive, or still in a depressed mode, or still he's in a state key, whether it may re-injure karke. So these are the, whether he has been psychologically strong enough to go to the play. These are the post-operative factors which are all these factors considered during the before return to play. Yeah, the post-operative rehabilitation, the exercise chosen in early, intermediate, and advanced stages of it should be carefully selected, as the graft used, maturation of the graft, nature of graft fixation, and the source of graft. We have discussed about it. And if hamstring graft, we need to consider if the hamstring graft, no active hamstring exercises until 2 weeks, and no open chain resisted exercises if there is a hamstring graft. And if patella graft, no resisted leg extension machine at any given point. Please consider this one. And if allograft, progression and rehabilitation has to be very slow, and returns and simultaneously return to the sport also will be slow. And again, the rehabilitation protocol should include strengthening and proprioceptive and neuromuscular and sport-specific drills. We'll discuss about it in the next slides, how to do this. So phase 1, that is from day 0 to day 7. That is, what are the goals? That is, we discussed we need to restore the full extension. We need to reduce the pain and swelling. Patellar mobility has to be done to increase the range, gradually improve the knee flexion, and establish quadriceps control and emphasize on independent mobilization. These are the goals which we need to take it within 7 days, plus or minus 2 or 3 days. So in the phase 1, what are the exercises? That is multi-angle isometric exercises and the bed exercises, all ankle pumps to stimulate to avoid the swelling as well as to take control of the calf muscles, overpressure into full passive knee extension, and active and passive knee flexion, that is 90. We need to achieve 90 degrees by 2 weeks, and SLR, that is straight leg raising, up to 45 to 50 degrees, and even with SLR we need to do on the abduction adduction movements. Hamstring stretches, very, very important, and CPM if needed, that is 0 to 45 to 50 degrees in first week, and thereby 90 degrees by 2 weeks. And cryotherapy definitely to reduce the inflammatory signs after every hour and immediately post exercises also. And continuing the same, what are the exercises? That are mini squats and weight shifts. We need to in standing posture, standing hamstring curls, quadriceps isometric strengthening, and weight bearing if it is tolerated with crutches or with a walker. That is how we can do the weight shifts also. That is phase 2, 2 to 4 weeks. Continue all the exercises from the phase 1, and along with that, you should have a muscle stimulation of the quadriceps, that to avoid any lack of a knee extension, and that is we usually use a Russian current and SLR in all the 4 planes. Proprioceptive training, full passive knee extension we need to achieve within 4 weeks, and static bicycling with minimal or no initially no resistance, gradually go on increasing the resistance of the cycling. Progressive program, that is start with 1 pound and gradually go on increasing 1 to 2 pounds in fact per week, and by then we need to have the independent ambulation by 4 weeks, that is without crutches or without walker. And the passive range of motion should be achieved, as I said, we discussed in the earlier, 115 to 120 degrees by the end of phase 2, that is 4 weeks. And eccentric quadriceps program, that is by 40 to 100 degrees, that is isotonic only, it is very important. And partial squats, that is between 0 to 90 degrees. And lateral lunges, we'll discuss about this. I'll try to give some exercises in the slide. Front and lateral lunges, front and lateral step ups, gait training on zero runner, which we have been using in our center, or elliptical trainer. This is new. If you don't, many of these times we don't have the aquatic or this other non-weight bearing training. So we use the zero runners for the gait training, where the 50% of the weight will be cut down on the knee or the injured knee, and still we can make him run or walk. And progressive progression drills and neuromuscular control drills. So as you said, this is partial squat, which can use with a chair or without the chair, that is between 0 to 90 degrees. This is front lunges, and this is lateral lunge, and this is the one which you are talking about, gait training on the zero runner, where these hinges, this is the knee hinge, and here you got a hip hinge, where these will take the load, 50% load, and the 50% load is only taken by the knee, but still we can put him on the gate. This helps, this zero runner or the elliptical, this helps in taking off the load from the knee, and still we can put him on the early gait training. Whereas in the routine cases, which we take in the 4 to 6 weeks, but this I can assure you that we can put it within the 3rd week of the injury or the surgery. So during the phase 3, that's between 4 to 10 weeks, exercise, that is what are exercise, that is wall squats, you all are quite aware of it, and vertical squats, and 2 calf raises to improve your calf muscle strength, stability and proprioception drills, and aquatic program if available. So these are the basic exercises which you need to consider during the 4 to 10 week. That is phase 3. And that's phase 3, 4 to, as I said here, between 4 to 10, if we divide it here between 6 to 8 and week 10, during 6 to 8, agility drills, depending on the what game he's playing, balance on tilt board, you are quite aware of it, throws on balance board, that is putting the patient on the tilt board and asking him to throw the you to throw the ball on the different directions, and still the athlete catches the ball without changing the without losing the balance. That is throwing on the balance board, plyometric leg presses, you're quite aware of it, and isokinetic exercises. And the 10th week, that is advanced plyometric days, you take ahead of from whatever the exercise you have done in the up to 8 weeks, to go ahead. That is advanced plyometric training drills, isokinetic test, that is concentric and external, which will be done on the machines. Yeah, this is what I was talking about, the neuromuscular rehabilitation or agility, or what I was talking about, the agility drills. This is, we can put it up, we are putting him on the Bosu ball and asking him to stay in 20 to 30 degrees of flexion, and depending on this pain, and if possible with the supported, we can ask him to go up to 90 degrees and straighten the knee with 10 to 15 repetitions. And this is how we are training the neuromuscular and as well agility training. And this is the agility training, one of the design. This is written to the one of the design for the agility training. Right, we are putting the cones here, start from here, run frontwards and backwards, from them change the direction. These all help you in changing the direction in a quick movement. This helps in case of football runners or football players or badminton players. I'm giving some examples. This drill will help them out. And this is aquatic training with weights. This is quite safe without any less percentage of injuries. And the phase 4, that is 6 months. By 6 months, patient should be able to run to normal ADL activities. I'm not telling return to sport, but during his ADL activities only by 6 months. I'll tell you why later. And from here on, once the athlete can able to go his ADL activities, from here on he can initiate his sport-specific drills. Yeah, post 6 months, the goal has to maintain the strength. What we are doing it, the same has to be maintained. Endurance. But all this time we are not thought of the endurance of the athlete, but from here we need to because of from last 6 months, because of his bed, he's in the bed or not mobilized, because of lack of mobility, the endurance level falls down, which is not up to the level or the mark of whatever game he is playing, and the proprioception, which are discussed now, and safely return to the sports. So to maintain these exercises, as we can use the therabands or loops, close kinematic chains, close kinematic exercises, endurance training, that is by stairmasters or stationary bike or treadmill, and definitely the core strengthening. You might be thinking like, why you need a core strengthening since you have been injured the knee, but whatever the strength with transfers, either it can be on the upper body or it can be on the hip or in the knee or even in the ankle, the weight or the strength, weight transfers from your core to the rest of the limbs. So definitely the core strengthening has to be involved. That is very much important. So, and then again going to the sport specific exercises. So evidence suggests that individuals performing the weight bearing exercise tend to have less pain compared to non-weight bearing. Don't be very conservative. So go on with the weight bearing exercises. So certain precautions has to be taken, considering if there are any other soft tissues involved during the ACL injuries. So if there is meniscal repair also has been done during the ACL repair. So these are certain precautions to be taken. That is, non-weight bearing has to be done after 4 weeks, and lock knee brace up to 4 weeks. Flexion range of exercise in non-weight bearing position, because if you put it in a weight bearing position, as you know, we are putting the pressure on the meniscus. So this is another consideration which we need to do if there is any. These are the 3 considerations to be understood before going further. If there is any meniscal repair. And if the allograft is taken, then pain is insufficient. Pain is not only the criteria for the different exercises. So we need to consider that, and if there is any less pain, but though there is pain is less, but the healing time is more, as we discussed earlier. So all these protocol phases changes. So healing time has to be considered if there is any cadaver or the allograft is taken. Continuing with the special precautions, if done on skeletally immature patients, then non-weight bearing has to be done after 6 weeks, and it can be allowed for gentle knee flexion in non-weight bearing position. Phase 2 of rehabilitation, if you recollect whatever has been done in the phase 2, that has to be done after 6 to 8 weeks. If this was in the routine case, it was done within the 4 weeks, but in the special precautions in case of immature patients, it has to be done after 6 to 8 weeks of the surgery. And all time frames should be delayed by 6 to 8 weeks in case of immature patients. So what are the criteria for the athlete to return to sports? One, he should be running first, whether he's a runner or any type of sports player. The running has to be easy. So adequate sports specific aerobic or anaerobic measures, whether he's a sprint runner or marathon runner or a cyclist. So accordingly, his aerobic and anaerobic condition has to be improved. Quadriceps and hamstring strength, which has to be minimum of 85% when compared to the normal or non-surgical leg. And quadriceps to hamstring ratio has to be equal in the affected limb. We cannot. So usually what happens is, in case of ACL injuries, quadriceps strengthening, quadriceps strengthening, and quadriceps strengthening. We very rarely we consider about we take our mind towards strengthening the hamstrings, because we have been taught like hamstrings are the major muscles in the knee stabilization. So we keep on strengthening concentrating over strengthening the quadriceps. But don't forget to strengthen the hamstring muscles also, which equally is important in holding the knee. So that is one of the reason where the last extension of the knee comes into consideration if this ratio is not equal. And the good results of the test battery. There are certain test batteries which you need to put the players on before putting it on the game. If he crosses all these test batteries, I will discuss about what are the test batteries. So if he crosses all these test batteries easily without any hicks, at least 85 to 90% when compared to the normal leg, then he's good enough to go to the play. And as usual, there should be no swelling or laxity, and obviously there should not be any psychological fear. Everything has been done. All that he has crossed all the test batteries, or the strength is good when compared to the normal, his quadriceps or hamstring, everything is good. But still, there is some sort of fear in the athlete's mind. If there is a fear, then you cannot push him to the field. So even that also has to be considered. So we need to counsel him to come down and get out of the fear of this injury. Yeah, this is what about the test batteries which I was talking about. These are the main test batteries. The first one here is called as a white test. Very shortly I will try to explain how this test is done. This is the place where initially we check with the non-injured or non-surgical limb, seeing to it that you are putting the non-injured knee in this position and trying to push these slides with the injured, so that we can see how much there is a stability in the non-injured knee. Taking the consideration of the distance the injured knee pushes or the weight the non-injured knee takes, it will be taken in the straight position or in the backward lateral position and in crossward lateral position. We can take these readings first with the non-injured knee, then we'll put the injured knee and see with the injured knee in the stable position how much you can take the load on the injured knee and push the same blocks on the 3 different directions, and then we calculate how much is the difference between the injured and the non-injured distance. So if it is anything 85% or more, the difference is less, then we consider yeah, he can go ahead with the he has crossed this test. And the second one is jump test, that is single leg jump test. We'll mark one line from here. We'll ask him first, we'll ask the athlete to jump with the normal leg. We'll take the distance, whatever the distance he has jumped with the normal leg, and then we'll ask to jump with the single leg, with the injured leg. Then we'll measure the distance between the injured and the non-injured leg. Then we'll compare the distance, and if it is anything 85 or less, then he's fit to go for the play. That is single leg jump, and this is triple jump with the again comparing with the injured and the non-injured. This is triple jump and triple crossover. Crossover jumps, we are asking the patient athlete to jump in a crossway directions, and during this process either the single or straight or the crossword or even the 6 minutes, if there is any sort of pain or giving the way, all these things has to be considered. And even the distance whatever has been jumped with the injured and the non-injured, that has to be compared. Considering all these things, if he's anything 85% or less, then he's passed this test battery. And the same thing goes with this jump testing, where we take 1 feet of stool from the ground. We ask him to jump with both the legs, that is, and on the table and back to the floor. If there is any injury or laxity, or if there is any oobling of the knee when he jumps up or down from the stool, then he still needs to go back to the rehabilitation process. And squat, that is 90 degrees or 90 degree squat test, squat exercises, and then the gait analysis. How well we have, if you recollect, I told about the gait will be changed during the injury, that is hand to knee gait, or knee will not be completely straightened. So that analysis has to be considered right from the knee, foot, and as well as the hip. So total gait analysis has to be checked post surgery. If everything is neat, then he can go back to the sport. And once again, I will tell you, these are these test batteries are till today, these are being practiced, but even after these test batteries, the athlete has crossed this test battery, still there are percentage of re-injuries within 1 year or 2 years. So we cannot 100% sealed or assured that these test batteries are the concrete conclusion to put the athletes back to the game. So these are certain certain criteria where we can consider, but even after that, I'll show you some. Even after that, the re-injuries are 50 to 60%. So that means about these test batteries, we need to still need to study how authentic these test batteries are. But unfortunately, these are the things we are still taking into consideration. So that's what I said. One of the study which has been done in this 69 athletes post surgery. The meta-analysis has been done in 2011, where 81% of the have been returned to any type of sports, 65% returned to pre-injury level, and which is very alarming is only 55% returned to competitive sports, their basic elite level or whatever the sports they were. Only 55% has been gone back to their actual sports. That is why I said that considering this percentage or considering this study, we need to reconsider about whether these test batteries are really authentic, or we still need to have a study on this. So why there is less percentage of return competitive sports? What are the factors or what are the reasons where there's so much of less of return to the sports? So factors which are come down, which are affecting because of the so much of less of 55% of less back to the return sports are. So one, if there are any age of the athlete is anything less than the 25 years, so there's 50% more likely to return to sports. And level of competition, if the athlete is elite athlete who has gone under surgery, he has 2% more likely to come back to return to sports. But if he's any below athlete, like state level or district level or any lower level of athlete, if he's athlete, then the percentage of returning to the sports falls down. But in case of elite athlete or national level or international level athletes, definitely because of their physical level pre-injury and because of their ankle strengthening and physiological changes which has been done in the affected knee or considering all that, in the elite players, the possibility of the return to sports doubles up. Fear of re-injury, because of as I said, that the psychological factors, that comes down to for 24 to 50%. This is one of the major factor, one of the 50% factor which is considered before going to the sports. That is lack of motivation. Player don't know whether he can come back to his original level, where he can give up his original level of performance. So there is lack of motivation. Confidence level comes down because of because of off ground or off the field from 4 to 6 to 8 months. Positive attitude will be very poor. There will be a lot of frustration. We have seen in many of the articles of the players post-injury, even if you have gone through any interviews of the elite level players, during what was the feeling of their feeling during the injury or during the rehabilitation process. This is the very most common. Frustration and depression are the very most common thing which they come across during this process. They have to come out frustration, or they have to come out of this depression. If they have to they have to come back to their original level in the play. So level of performance also comes down, and the pressure and expectation from the team members, coaches, and even the family members. So all this is completely a team sport. This is a completely a team rehabilitation process. So player has to come up with all these, and as a team or as a physio, it is your part to make him understand and make him come out of this process, pressure and all the other frustrations. And definitely there will be, as I said, the expectations will be high from the team members. For example, in case of Sachin Tendulkar, if he has come back to this one, everybody expects that right from the day game one after the injury, everybody expects to hit the century. But such expectations will cause a lot of mental pressure on the player. Either it can be team members or the coach or the family members. So these are the main of the factors affecting the return to sports. So in case of long-term consequence of the ACL, the first and the foremost are the recurrent injury, which I said that 6 to 34% have been injured, have come up with the recurrent injuries. Again, the factors may be improper post-rehabilitation or improper surgery, or other factors which has come across, or the fear of injury that leads to 6 to 34% of recurrent injuries. And damage to articular cartilage. In one of the study done by the Grandam in the 2016, they have seen this articular cartilage goes on eroding after say around 7 years after the injury. That is the early, they come across early osteoarthritis. That is because they have done in one of the study considering after 9 months, 6 months after the rehabilitation and the 9 months after the rehabilitation. When they have seen the study of the 6 months of the rehabilitation, they have seen this, the structure of the meniscus, and they made him to run for the 30 minutes and then again they came back and have seen the MRI structure again. They have seen a lot of changes in the MRI of the meniscus. Whereas when you see, when the athlete goes for the 9 months of the protocol, from 9 months of the rehabilitation, and when they have seen the structure of the meniscus, the structure of the meniscus has been pretty much retained. So they concluded till now that 6 months of the rehabilitation is not enough. They need to go for the 9 months of the proper rehabilitation to avoid further long-term further damages. Like one of these is the cartilage and the meniscus. The inability to participate in sports, pain, and all these reduced to the quality of the life. So concluding about these knee injuries, especially ACL tears are potentially devastating problem among athletes, and they lead to a lot of time loss. That is, 9 months is not a very small amount, guys. 6 months to 9 months is not a small gap, because you all know in case of elite or in case of national level and the international level of game, their lifespan is only up to 30 to 35 level. Beyond that, certain various physiological changes and the reflexes inhibited, all this comes down. So considering that for one injury, losing for 9 months is very long term. So potentially there's too much of devastating problem in the athletes and players' career and financial burden, because many of them are do not come, especially in India, and even a few of them in the international. Many of them won't come in a good financial background, so they'll be just picking up during that. They'll be having slightly enjoying this one financial during that. If they come across this ACL and losing the 9 months and coming out of the game for 9 months, they all lose the sponsorship, they lose their contract with the teams or the national level teams. So by that, a lot of burden will be there on the financial aspect, and families, there will be a lot of burden on the families and the healthcare system as well. So injury prevention strategies should continue to be a high priority. So first, we need to make them train during the rehabilitation process. The proper exercise protocol has to be there. Good strengthening and good neuromuscular rehabilitation has to be there to avoid these injuries. That doesn't mean, in spite of doing all the 100%, that doesn't mean that athletes won't go for any injuries, but definitely we can reduce the percentage of the injury. So strategies has to be taken, had to be guidelines has to be done very strategically, and in order to reduce the incidence and the severity of the knee injuries. So ultimately, what we can take home from the message, what are the challenges during rehabilitation of the ACL injuries? That is, we need to identify whether it's only the ACL injury or any other ligaments like meniscus or the other PCL or the MCL has been injured. Rehabilitation, whether it has to be properly done, and good quadriceps strength, but without overloading. This many times we have seen that quadriceps strength. During this process, you keep on loading it, but end of the day, the patient, after your rehabilitation process, the patient complains of the anterior knee pain, which I discussed earlier. That is because of the overloading of the quadriceps. So very much balance has to be there between loading and overloading, the strengthening and overstrengthening of the quadriceps to avoid this anterior knee pain. This is very much, even in spite of all the rehabilitation, there will be a lot of knee pain during his game or post rehabilitation. So this has to be very much considered during the rehabilitation process. So challenges after ACL. Earlier we were discussed about the during rehabilitation, and this is after ACL. What are the tests? As I said, the test batteries has to be successfully passed by any athlete to decrease re-injury rate. And again, we discussed earlier that still there are certain percentage of re-injuries, up to 34 to 50% of re-injuries are there. So again, I'm telling you, these test batteries are to the certain level, but definitely not the concrete. we still need to understand what are the changes we need to do to reduce the percentage of re-injury. So test batteries has to be successfully, as of now, these any patient, any athlete has to cross these test batteries. And according to the study done by Grandam, 9 months is better than 6 months to avoid the long-term complications, which were discussed earlier, like osteoarthritis or meniscal injuries. Thank you. Any questions? Hope it was clear.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Amit. It was a nice session. Participants, can you have any questions? You can raise your hand. Kirpal Singh. Kirpal Singh.
Yes, go ahead.
Kirpal Singh can.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
You
go
can
ahead.
speak directly to the speaker.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Tell me.
Sir, I did not get any screen of your PPT from the beginning.
Yeah, that may be your Zoom application updation. I think you need to update the Zoom app, which has been updated recently. So I think you might be using the old version. So that may be the issue.
I don't know, sir, but I used many of message to you and your host to the host, but didn't any reply from your sides.
Yeah, that's what you have to update your.
Again. So I think they should not have any issues. Anyways, I would request
Okay,
all the participants to ask questions if they have any.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, even after going through the video, we are not able to see the slides. If you have any if you have any queries, you can drop in your question to my WhatsApp or mail it. Sir, you can please share my number so that later on they can drop in their questions.
Sure, sir.
Yeah.
Sure, sir. We will drop in the chat box your email ID and your mobile number.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, any questions? Darshana Banshali. You can speak.
Sir, please can you explain again phase 1 treatment of rehabilitation?
Phase 1, basically we need to consider about the pain and swelling. So icing, isometric exercises. Phase 1, that will be from 0 to 7 days. During this period, you need to cut down the inflammation, that is by icing. Gentle passive range of movement, that is only up to 30 degrees. 0 to 30 degrees of knee flexion has to be achieved. And the isometric hams and quads, and ankle pumpings to avoid swelling. These are the phase 1 exercises which has to be taken.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, fine. Next, Dr. Srinivasulu. You can ask question. Dr. Srinivasulu.
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's nice one, sir. And my question is like starting up the PPT, we discuss about the risk factors or the reasons for the injury, right? So in that,
Yeah.
can this flat foot also will cause one of the things, because we treat ACL a lot here in our setup a lot, where I seen almost like 80 to 85% of patients all are like flat foot patients. So where flat foot will change the kinematics of entire lower limb. So internal rotation of the tibia will go, right, which will slack the ACL.
Yeah.
Right. So in that, when they go for the impact or something, already it is like stretched one, it can go for the tear. So why can't we, in the rehab session, why can't we go for the kinetic chain exercise or something? Like glue.
Yeah, definitely we need to consider about, as I said, it's a closed kinematic chain. So
Yeah.
even as I said, like as I was talking about, we have to strengthen the core. The same thing during that process. I talked about strengthening the core and the endurance. The same thing goes with even considering if there are any malalignment in the ankle. Definitely, we need to strengthen your foot muscles if there is, or if there is a strengthen, or you need to change the footwears to change this flat foot.
Yeah. Sir, if you don't mind, I have one more this one also. Can we go ahead or?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. The test when we discuss about Lachman test, anti-drag test, these things for the only ACL I'm saying. These are the most of the researchers they say actually. Recently, I come across like one test is called Lilly's test, but the sensitivity, those things when we see, I couldn't find. So, what's your opinion on that? Can we consider this also one of the best one, like next to Lachman test or something like that?
Yeah, depending on the what stage the athlete has come. If initially definitely in the acute stage, definitely cannot even check out these all these Lachman test also. But you need to consider this Lilly's test, how authentic it is,
Yeah.
and then we can
Because
go
there is no much publications on that. So
Yeah.
just
We are
about it.
hardly here, and even if you discuss with the upcoming or ortho surgeons also, they hardly talk about it. They hardly talk about it. So till today, we can consider these tests for evaluation.
So what about the open kinetic chain in your like point of view, like when we can start it? Because when I read about the maybe like almost everyone knows like a Melbourne guidelines by Mick Hughes, right? He says like 3 to 4 weeks we can go for the open kinetic chain exercise. So what's your point on that?
Definitely, the open kinetic chain, definitely we can go after 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, one consideration criteria, and the another criteria during the closed, if there is at least 70% of the quadriceps improvement, then you can go for. And another thing is there is no any anterior knee pain, then you can go for the open kinematic chain.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. There are few questions from the Facebook live viewers also. Can we have those questions, sir?
Sure.
A few questions from the Facebook.
You can ask.
I have, sir. So there is one question from the Facebook viewer. Okay, how much is it effective laser in rehabilitation of ACL?
Laser treatment. So it is usually one of the tool, but no any studies has been done that this will help when compared to the other this one. What we practice here is not much of this one. What much of the modalities you totally go with the exercise protocol. That is one of the silent. Yeah, definitely it helps, but in the overall protocol, if the pain or swelling still persists beyond the certain limit, then you can use it. There is no problem with that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think the Facebook viewer who had asked this question might have got cleared. There's one more question. Did the person can still work after 10 years of ACL injury without treatment? Can he goes for the work? Like what the participant is, he has asked the question, whether he can go for the work even after 10 years of ACL injury without treatment.
Okay, sir, it depends on whether the patient is athlete or ADL worker, routine worker. If he's a routine worker where his activities doesn't include any jumping or any vigorous activity like squatting or any twist and turn movements, definitely we can manage him conservatively without going for the surgery. And again, even if it is, I can give an example. Even if it is complete tear, still we can go without the surgery. For example, in my center itself, I have trained complete ACL tear for the marathon runner, and he's doing good. he has no any issues with 25 kilometers of running, around 75 kilometers of 75 to 100 kilometers of cycling and swimming. He's an Ironman. He has done a lot of post rehabilitation conservatively and complete tear. He has done many events. After that, there is absolutely no issue. So it depends. So since he's a marathon runner, he's not a sprint runner, he's a marathon runner, not much load on the knee, considering the jumpers or the pivot movement or the basketball players or the other movements. Considering that, I'm giving this example. So if it all depends on what game he is playing, what type of movements are involved in the game. Considering that, we can treat him conservatively, or we have to go for the surgery.
Sure, sir. So there are few questions in question and answers box. I will just take out the few questions. How do we do isokinetic functional test?
Come again, sir?
Isokinetic functional test. How do you do isokinetic functional test?
Isokinetic functional test in the advanced, this one we come across the isokinetic machines. We do it on that at different angle, putting the athlete at from 0 to 30 degrees, 30 to 70 degrees, 70 to 90 degrees, 90 to 120 degrees. We check how much of this one has been evolved. On the screen we get it. This is very bit difficult doing of this one without that machine, but yeah, this is done and seen how much the quadriceps has been fired. So considering that at the different angles, that is very important. At the different angles, we see how much the quadriceps has been strengthened, how much the quadriceps is firing. Depending on that, we do the isokinetic testing.
Okay. There was a question from the participants. You had already mentioned the triple jump. Is it forward or lateral jump?
Initially, in the test battery, it is definitely forward, but when you are putting him on the field, we also need to test laterally also. In the test battery, it is only the forward.
Okay. Okay. How to hack this quadriceps and hamstring ratio?
That is by isokinetic strength test, sir. Whatever the amount of isokinetic, whatever the amount of firing has been happening in the quadriceps in that particular angle, we have to check with the same with the hamstrings.
Mm-hmm. What position of the knee we can reach ACL while giving laser or ultrasound? This was the question from the participants. I think.
Okay. There is no any particular. We cannot. There is something like
correct.
Angle that where we can prominent the ACL, because usually we are studied in the college, like for example in case of bicipital tendinitis, open the shoulder so that you can laser or the ultrasound can be easily put on the bicep. So unfortunately, there is no any sort of particular angle.
Correct, sir. Yeah, there are a lot of questions in the QA and box. So I'm just going through that and picking up which is a prominent one.
Please.
There was one question that whether phase-wise management or long-term, short-term goal-wise the treatment is planned. What is your suggestion? Like that they're asking, sir.
See, phase-wise only we need to fix the goal. You're asking that, sir, whether we have to go by phase-wise or to go by the goal-wise.
Long-term or short-wise, yes, correct.
Long-term, yeah. In the phase 0, first 4 weeks, that is a short of 4 to even short-term up to 8 weeks, we can consider of the short-term goals. Depending on what are the goals, we need to go for both go hand in hand, sir. We cannot change the phase and we cannot change the goal.
Correct.
We need to highlight what are the goals we need to achieve in that phase. So accordingly, we need to rehabilitate.
Correct. Any other questions from the participants? Bharat Krishnamurthy and Dr. Bharat Krishnamurthy. You can ask directly.
Hello.
Yes, you can speak
Yeah,
directly
tell
to
me.
the speaker.
Go
Sir,
ahead.
good evening, sir. In what phase we can use the CPM, sir?
CPM, that's what I said, is not mandatory, but up to first two phases, you can go for the CPM. That is maximum of 14 days post surgery until you achieve 90 degrees of knee flexion. You can go.
Okay. And second, one more question regarding I have a meniscectomy. Meniscectomy. Can you explain the meniscectomy? After the meniscectomy, few patients are getting the limping sign, and they are having the Trendelenburg sign also positive. But when we check the gluteal muscles, they are strong, but they are still limping after 6 months also. What is the reason?
So definitely this is, you are talking about the meniscectomy, but still we spoke about the ACL, but still I'll try to tell you that
Yes.
if you're still, still the patient is limping, definitely there might be anterior knee pain or the weak quadriceps.
Okay, sir. That's thank you. Sir.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. There are a lot of questions also from the participants and even Facebook viewers. I request all the viewers and participants, you can directly reach the speaker, Dr. Amit. We will text in the box, in the chat box, his email ID and the phone number. So later on, you can ask directly, or you can send email to him so that he can reply whenever he is free. So because we have lacking the time now, it's already been now 8:30, which is been beyond the time limit. Okay, there was a technical issues also. We regret for that. And thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Amit, for your wonderful session on ACL injuries, rehabilitation, and ready to go for sports. Okay,
Yes, sir.
that's wonderful session. And definitely in future also, we would like to have more sessions from you. And I wish you all the best for your future. I think Pro Fitness, which is doing well in Hubli. Thank you so much, sir. And I request Dr. Sai Mahendra, who is organizing chairman, to speak few words.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Singh sir. Yes, sir, Amit sir, you were telling something. Please go on.
Yeah, I would like to also thank KSPF and Mahendra sir for giving the opportunity to share whatever a bit of it I had, and it was really wonderful being with you guys. And definitely, if needed, I'll be always there for any questions or any queries. Thank you, Mahendra sir, and thank you, KSPF.
Thank you so much, Amit sir. It was wonderful to have you be a speaker of this webinar. I apologize for some technical errors that we had initially, but I'm sure that most of the participants who joined us have stayed with us and had their doubts cleared. We have a series of webinar coming up from today, and we have Dr. Vijay Samuel who would be speaking tomorrow. And I wish all the participants to join us again tomorrow. We will be sharing the meeting ID and the password so that you can register for the link, register through the link, and join the webinar. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, and good night. Thank you, Dr. Narsingh, also
Thank you, sir.
being a part of this. Thank you, sir.